Billionaire husband took his wife to his luxury office and called her insignificant. Minutes later, $2 billion partners stormed out. His secretary broke down, whispering, "Sir, do you realize who your wife really is?" Don't miss Chapter 9, a great surprise for everyone. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. May the Almighty bless every woman with strength that moves mountains, courage that faces every storm, and a heart so full of love it changes the world. May He honor your sacrifices, protect your dreams, and fill your life with dignity and endless blessings. Women, you are the foundation of every home, the heartbeat of every family, and the light that guides humanity. Without your love, the world loses its soul, its warmth, and its hope. I pray that every woman here feels valued, respected, and cherished, not just today, but every day. May your struggles be recognized, your wisdom celebrated, and your sacrifices never forgotten. May your life be filled with health, happiness, and peace, and may your hearts always overflow with joy and love. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." Let's start with love. 3 in the morning, and Terry's hands were already covered in spices. She'd been awake since midnight, her mind too full of excitement to sleep. Today was Paul's meeting, the one he'd been rehearsing for weeks, the one that could expand Ronald development across 3 states, the one he kept saying would change everything. So she was making Grandma Ruth's jerk chicken. The chicken thighs had been marinating since Saturday, 3 days of Scotch bonnet peppers, allspice, and thyme working into the meat. Grandma Ruth had taught her this recipe in the final weeks of her life, pressing the stained recipe card into Terry's palm like a sacred text. "This is love in a pot, baby," Grandma Ruth had whispered, her grip surprisingly strong despite the cancer. "You feed someone this. You're feeding them your soul. You take care of my boy. Promise me you'll be his strength." Terry had promised, and for 8 years she'd kept that promise in ways big and small, visible and invisible. Now she worked the marinade deeper into the chicken, adjusted the Dutch oven's heat to that perfect low simmer. By lunchtime it would be fall-off-the-bone tender. Paul would recognize the smell immediately. He'd probably get emotional the way he always did when something reminded him of his grandmother. By the time morning light crept through the windows, Terry had the chicken packed in an insulated container. She'd already laid out Paul's charcoal suit upstairs, pressed his lucky tie, polished his shoes until they gleamed. Everything perfect, everything ready. When Paul came downstairs, he was already on his phone, gesturing as he talked about projections and growth potential. He grabbed the coffee she'd prepared without looking at her, took a long drink, gave her a distracted smile. Terry waited, holding the container of jerk chicken, waiting to be seen. He finished his call and finally looked at her properly. "Sorry, baby. Crazy morning. What's up? I made you something special for your big meeting." She held out the container. "Your grandmother's jerk chicken, the real recipe. I thought for today you should have something that reminds you of her." His face softened for just a moment. There was the man she'd fallen in love with. Then his phone buzzed and the moment passed. He took the container, kissed her cheek quickly, headed for the door. "You're the best, Ter. Don't know what I'd do without you." Then he was gone, and Terry stood in the kitchen that still smelled like Scotch bonnet peppers, feeling that familiar hollow ache she'd been ignoring for years. By mid-morning, Terry couldn't wait anymore. She'd go to his office, wish him luck, just for a minute. She drove downtown to the gleaming tower that housed Ronald Development, the building she actually owned through a shell corporation leased to Paul at below-market rates. He didn't know that. He thought he'd negotiated brilliantly. The lobby was all marble and aggressive wealth. Terry wore jeans and a Howard sweatshirt, comfortable clothes for working from home. Looking at the suited executives, she suddenly felt underdressed, small. The young receptionist looked up, her eyes sweeping over Terry's casual clothes dismissively. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Paul Ronald. I'm his wife, Terry." The receptionist's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Ronald is in meetings all day. You can leave anything here." "I'd like to give it to him myself, just for a second." The receptionist's expression shifted to something like pity. "Ma'am, Mr. Ronald doesn't take personal visits during business hours. I can schedule something for later this week." Something hot twisted in Terry's stomach. Schedule something? To see her own husband? "Could you just let him know I'm here? He'll want to see me." The receptionist sighed but made the call. Her expression shifted to surprise before smoothing back to neutral. "You can go up. 15th floor." When the elevator opened, Dorothy, Paul's assistant, was waiting with kind eyes and barely concealed concern. "Mrs. Ronald," Dorothy said carefully, "Mr. Ronald is finishing up in the conference room. He asked me to bring you back." Something in Dorothy's voice made Terry's stomach tighten, but before she could ask, Dorothy was leading her down a glass-walled hallway to a conference room where Paul gestured animatedly to two people at a long table, a distinguished Asian man in an expensive suit, a woman with sharp silver hair and sharper eyes. Dorothy knocked softly. Paul looked up, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something like irritation before settling on a forced smile. "Terry, this is unexpected." The two investors turned. The woman's eyes sharpened with recognition. The man watched her with sudden intensity. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," Terry said quickly, aware of her sweatshirt, her jeans. "I just wanted to drop something off. I can go." "No, since you're here." Paul took the small bag from her hands dismissively. "This is my wife, Terry. Terry, this is Hiroshi Tanaka and Rebecca Walsh. We're going over preliminary numbers." Terry smiled, offering her hand. "It's nice to meet you. I've read about your companies. The sustainable development work in Asia is impressive, Mr. Tanaka. And Ms. Walsh, your piece in the Financial Times about balancing profit with social impact was excellent." The room went quiet. Rebecca Walsh's expression shifted to something unreadable. Then Paul laughed, loud, forced, jarring. "Terry reads lifestyle magazines, architectural digests," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Terry's skin prickle. She probably saw a feature spread. "Honey, Rebecca and Hiroshi are here for serious market analysis, complex financial projections. Why don't you head home and make sure dinner's ready? The adults need to talk about complicated business things." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Terry's face flushed hot. Her hands shook. She looked at Paul, waiting for him to realize what he'd said, to take it back, to see her. But he was already turning back to the investors. "Anyway, as I was saying about the projections, actually," Rebecca Walsh said, her voice cutting like a blade, "I think we're done here." She stood, gathering materials swiftly. "Mr. Ronald, Walsh Investments will not be participating. Thank you for your time." Hiroshi Tanaka stood as well, his disapproval clear. "Tanaka Enterprises must also decline. Good day." As Rebecca passed Terry, she paused, looked her directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Macmillan, please give my regards to your mother. I had dinner with her at the Foundation Gala last month. Extraordinary woman. It runs in the family." She walked out. Hiroshi followed with a respectful nod to Terry. The silence was suffocating. Paul turned to Dorothy, panic rising. "What just happened? Why did they walk out? We were this close." Dorothy's expression was neutral, but her voice was firm. "Mr. Ronald, I need to ask you something. Do you have any idea who your wife actually is?" Paul stared at her. "What kind of question is that? She's Terry. She's my wife. What does this have to do with anything?" Dorothy looked at Terry, and in her eyes Terry saw everything. Recognition, understanding, years of watching. "Mrs. Macmillan," Dorothy said softly, using her full name. Paul's head snapped up. I think you should go home. And Mr. Ronald, you should follow her. Because if you don't understand what just happened, you're about to lose more than an investment deal. The words hung like prophecy. Terry looked at Paul one last time, saw him staring with confusion and frustration, saw him looking at her the way he had for 8 years, seeing the surface, missing everything underneath. She walked to the conference table, picked up the insulated container she'd brought that morning, the one she'd been preparing since Saturday, the jerk chicken that represented a promise to a dying woman and 8 years of invisible love. She opened it, let the smell fill the room, watched Paul's face soften as he recognized his grandmother's kitchen. Then she closed it, held it against her chest. This took me 4 days to make, Paul, she said, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. 4 days of planning and marinating and waking at 3 this morning to cook it exactly right. 4 days of love trying to send you into your big day feeling supported. She walked toward the door, paused. You didn't even ask what was in it this morning. You just took it and left. You didn't notice I'd been up for hours. You didn't notice me at all. You haven't noticed me in 8 years. Her voice cracked. This is the last meal I'll ever make for you. I'm done cooking for someone who can't taste love in the food. I'm done making myself small so you can feel big. I'm done being invisible to the one person who should have seen me most. She set the container on the table. Grandma Ruth made me promise to take care of you. I kept that promise, but she never told me I had to lose myself doing it. Terry looked at him one last time. Enjoy your lunch, Paul. I hope it was worth it. I hope 8 years of me being nothing so you could feel like something was worth losing the woman who built everything you think you are. Then she walked out of that conference room, out of that building, out of the fiction that had been their marriage. Dorothy caught up with her in the hallway. I've wanted to quit for 2 years, she said quietly. Watching him treat you like that. If you're leaving, I'm leaving too. Terry felt tears prick her eyes. He's going to need you. Things are about to get very hard. Good, Dorothy said firmly. He needs to learn what hard looks like when you don't have a woman holding up the entire sky. They rode the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, Terry pulled out her phone, looked at notifications from deals she needed to close, an empire she needed to stop hiding. What happens now? Dorothy asked. Terry looked up at the building. Now I stop being invisible. Now everyone finds out who Teresa McMillan is, and Paul learns what his life looks like without me holding it up. She drove away, watching the building shrink in her mirror. Somewhere on the 15th floor, Paul was trying to understand what happened, why his investors walked out, what Dorothy meant about knowing who his wife was. He'd figure it out soon. The whole city would. But right now, Terry needed to go to her real office, make calls, start stepping from shadows into light, needed to become who she'd always been but had been too afraid to show. Teresa McMillan, billionaire, empire builder. The woman who'd made herself invisible for love and was about to become unforgettable. The woman Paul never saw, but everyone else was about to. And once they did, there would be no going back. The reckoning was coming. Chapter 2. The Foundation of Love. 8 years earlier, the community center in Chicago's South Side smelled like fresh paint and hope. Terry stood at the back of the room, watching the evening financial literacy class filter in. Adults juggling day jobs and night school, parents building better futures, people who'd been told money wasn't for folks like them. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at a charity gala downtown where wealthy people paid thousands to feel good about themselves. But Terry had attended enough galas. Tonight she wanted something real. The instructor walked in late, juggling a briefcase and coffee, apologizing profusely, tall, with warm brown skin and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. His suit was off the rack but pressed. His shoes old but polished. Everything about him suggested a man who took care with what he had. Sorry, everyone, he said, setting materials down. Long day at work, but we're here to talk about compound interest. I know it sounds boring, but this stuff changes lives. Terry leaned forward. She knew compound interest, had built her first fortune on understanding it better than anyone. But the way this man explained it, breaking it down into stories that made sense to people who'd never had savings accounts, it was beautiful. Teaching without condescension. Respect wrapped in education. A young woman raised her hand. But how am I supposed to save when I'm working 2 jobs and still can't make rent? This sounds great for rich people. What about us? The instructor's face softened. That's exactly the right question. Every wealthy person you've heard of had to save their first dollar at some point. I'm not saying it's easy, the system is rigged, but if you understand how money works, you can make better decisions with whatever you have. Even $5 matters. Terry watched him interact with each student, never checking his watch, never making anyone feel stupid. When an older man admitted he couldn't read well, the instructor sat beside him without hesitation, reading each question aloud. After class, Terry approached him. That was really good teaching. He looked up, surprised. Were you sitting in? Back row. I'm Terry. Paul. His handshake was warm. You thinking about taking the class? Maybe. Can I ask what you do during the day? I'm a junior project manager at a development company. Affordable housing, mostly. Doesn't pay great yet, but I believe in the work. He smiled self-consciously. Sorry, I sound like an idealist. No, Terry said quietly. You sound like someone who cares. That's rare. Something passed between them. This man had no idea who she was. No idea she could fund his community center for a decade with one check. He was just talking to her like she mattered for reasons beyond her bank account. Can I buy you coffee? The words escaped before she'd thought them through. I'd love to hear about your housing projects. Paul's smile could have lit the city. I'd like that. They went to a diner 3 blocks away with cracked vinyl booths and terrible coffee. Paul ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. Terry noticed but said nothing. Instead, she asked about his work, his dreams, his vision for affordable housing. He talked for an hour, sketching building designs on napkins, explaining how small layout changes could make units more livable, how community spaces could transform neighborhoods. He talked about his grandmother, who'd raised him in falling apart public housing, how she deserved better, how everyone deserved better. I know it sounds naive, Paul said. I know I'm just one person, and maybe I can't change anything, but I have to try. It's not naive, Terry said. It's hope. Hope changes the world. They talked until the diner started closing. Paul walked her to her car, the oldest, most unassuming one she owned. She was grateful for that choice now. She didn't want money entering this yet. Can I see you again? Paul asked, vulnerable. If you want, no pressure. I'd like that, Terry said. A lot. They dated for months before Terry revealed anything real. She used her mother's maiden name, Johnson instead of Macmillan, said she worked in consulting, let him assume that meant answering phones, dressed down when they met, drove that unassuming sedan. She watched him save for weeks to take her to a nice restaurant, watched him stress over affording appetizers. She ordered the cheapest entree and pretended not to notice his relief. Later, she anonymously paid off the credit card he'd used, routing it through a shell company. He'd think it was a billing error. She met his family, his mother who cleaned houses, his sister who worked as a nurse. They welcomed her with warmth and home-cooked meals, assuming she was working class like them. Terry didn't correct them. She helped with dishes, played with his nieces, was just Terry, and it felt more real than anything in her life. On their first Christmas, Paul gave her a polyester scarf he'd saved to buy. It probably cost him a week of careful budgeting. Terry wore it every day for a month, until Paul joked she should wash it. For his birthday, Terry desperately wanted to give him something extravagant. But she couldn't without revealing herself. So she baked a cake from scratch, decorated it badly, gave him a handmade card. Paul cried, said no one had ever put that thought into something for him. That's when Terry knew she was completely, irrevocably in love. When Paul's business loan was rejected for the third time, Terry watched him break down. Maybe I'm kidding myself. Maybe I should just accept being middle management forever. Terry held him and made a decision. She would help him. She had the money, connections, power to make his dreams real, but she'd do it invisibly. Let him think he earned it, because Paul needed to believe in his capability. The next week, Paul received a letter from an investment firm he'd never heard of. They were interested in his housing proposal. Paul came to Terry ecstatic, unable to believe his luck. The firm was her shell company. The meeting was with her employee briefed to let Paul shine. The loan was approved within a week. Paul called crying with joy. "We're doing this, baby. We're actually doing this." "You did this," Terry said softly. "You believed, and you worked, and you earned it." She meant every word, even though every word was a lie. Paul proposed on Saturday morning in his tiny apartment. He'd saved for months for a ring. She knew because she'd seen his budget notebook. The ring was small, from a pawn shop, and he was terrified. Terry said yes before he finished asking. The ring fit perfectly. She'd wear it every day for 8 years, even after she could afford diamonds worth more than houses, because this ring meant he'd saved and chosen her. They married in a small ceremony at a community center. Paul's family, Terry's friends, her employees who understood to keep her secrets. The whole thing cost less than $1,000. On their wedding night, Paul held her and whispered, "I'm going to build you an empire. I promise. I'm going to give you everything you deserve." Terry's heart broke and soared. She touched his face, this beautiful man wanting to give her the world, not knowing she already owned significant pieces of it. "You already give me everything I need," she whispered back. "You give me you." She almost told him then, almost explained about the money, the companies, the orchestrating, but he looked so happy, so proud, so full of promise. She couldn't take that from him. So Terry made a choice. She'd be his wife, his supporter, his invisible foundation. She'd let him feel like the man building their future while she worked behind the scenes. She'd sacrifice visibility for his confidence, recognition for his pride. She told herself it was love. Looking back from that conference room 8 years later, Terry would understand it was also fear. Fear that if Paul knew the truth, he'd love her differently. Or worse, love her money instead. So she stayed invisible. And Paul, wrapped in the comfortable fiction she'd built, never once thought to look behind the curtain, until the day she stopped holding it up, until the day she let him fall, until the day she understood that love without truth isn't really love at all. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Terry drove home from Paul's office in silence, hands steady despite the shaking in her chest. The lunch container sat in the passenger seat, the jerk chicken probably cold now. Hours of work cooling into congealed disappointment. She pulled into their driveway and sat staring at the house they'd shared for 8 years. Modest, 3-bedroom, nice neighborhood. Paul always talked about moving somewhere bigger. Terry deflected, saying she loved this place. The truth was, she owned it outright, had deeded it to them as a wedding gift Paul thought came from her aunt. The truth was, she owned half the neighborhood. Inside, every room held memories of making herself smaller. The kitchen where she'd cooked thousands of meals. The home office Paul never entered where she ran her empire. The bedroom where she'd held him through nightmares and never asked him to hold hers. Terry walked to that office and unlocked the file cabinet she'd kept sealed their entire marriage. Inside were documents telling the real story. Property deeds, investment portfolios, board memberships, legal documents showing her ownership in dozens of companies, including every shell corporation that had funded Paul's ventures. She spread them across the desk and waited. Paul arrived 3 hours later, footsteps heavy on stairs. He'd been calling. She'd turned off her phone. "Terry?" His voice echoed anxiously. Baby, where are you? We need to talk about today. I'm in here, Terry called from the office. Calm, eerily so. Paul appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, jacket over one arm, exhausted and frustrated and completely unprepared. His eyes scanned the room, the open cabinet, the documents, and something flickered across his face that might have been fear. "What is all this?" he asked. "Sit down, Paul." "I don't want to sit. I want to know what happened. Rebecca Walsh and Hiroshi Tanaka walked out because you—" "Because I what?" Terry's voice stayed level. "Because I tried to contribute. Because I spoke in a room where adults were talking." Paul flinched. "That came out wrong. I was trying to—" "You were trying to make me small," Terry said. "You succeeded. Now sit down because we're having the conversation we should have had 8 years ago." He sat slowly, eyes never leaving her face. Terry picked up the first document, slid it across. "This house, the one you think we're paying a mortgage on? We own it, fully. I bought it cash before we married." Paul stared like it was written in code. "What? The mortgage payments? Go into an account I set up. The money's still there. I was going to surprise you." She slid another document. "This investment firm that gave you your first loan? Mine, one of my shell companies. I approved it myself." Another. "The construction company you use? Mine. Preferential rates, prioritized projects." Another. "The property management finding your locations? Mine." Paul's face went pale, then red, then pale again. He picked up documents with shaking hands, scanning, setting them down, picking up others. "This isn't possible. You're a consultant. You work from home." "I'm a real estate developer," Terry said quietly. "Built my first company at 24, sold it 3 years later, built another. By the time I met you, I had more money than most people see in lifetimes. Now I own 43 buildings in this city. I'm worth just under $4 billion. The number hit Paul physically. He rocked back. $4 billion. That's impossible. I would have known. I use shell companies, different names. I sit on boards under my mother's maiden name. I've been very careful to keep business and personal separate. I didn't want money to complicate us." "Complicate us?" Paul's voice rose. "You lied for 8 years." "I never lied." Terry's voice stayed steady. "I just didn't correct your assumptions. You assumed I was poor because I'm from the South Side. You assumed I had no education because I didn't brag. You assumed I was simple because I cooked and cleaned. I didn't lie. You never asked." "That's bullshit. Lying by omission is lying." "You're right," Terry said, watching surprise flicker. "I should have told you. But Paul, when I met you, I'd spent years having people want me for my money. Every man, every friend, there was always that question. Were they there for me or what I could give them?" She walked to the window, looked out at the street she owned. "Then I met you. This beautiful man who wanted to build affordable housing and teach financial literacy. You had no idea who I was. You liked me for me. And I thought if I kept that separate, we could have something real. So you manipulated me," Paul said bitterly. "Set me up to succeed and let me think I did it. Made me feel like a man when really I was your puppet." Terry turned. "I wanted you to feel proud. I wanted you to believe in yourself. Was that wrong?" "Yes!" Paul exploded from his chair. "You took away my agency. Every success was bought. Every door was unlocked. Do you know what that does to a person? Finding out their life is a lie? Your life isn't a lie. Your work isn't a lie. You're talented. I just made sure you got opportunities to prove it." "That's not the same." His voice broke. They stood surrounded by evidence of Terry's invisible empire, and the silence felt like watching something die. "Those investors," Paul said quieter, "Rebecca and Hiroshi, they knew who you were." "Yes. And when I dismissed you, they walked out because they've been trying to meet with me for years, because you humiliated me in front of people who respect me." Terry's voice hardened. "Because you called me insignificant in my own building." Paul sank back, head in hands. Oh God, Dorothy tried to warn me. Dorothy knows. So does your board. 3 of them work for me. They've been reporting back, making sure your company stayed solvent. My entire board. Color drained again. Who else knows? Most of your professional circle, not your family. I protected you there. But in business, everyone knows. They've wondered for years why you didn't. Why you introduced me as just a housewife at events where I'd been the keynote speaker the year before. She pulled out one final document. This is your company, the ownership structure, the investors, the capital, where it comes from. He took it with shaking hands, scanned it. She watched realization hit. You own 67% of my company. I do. I've been working for you. You've been working for yourself. I'm just the majority investor. Paul set it down carefully. When he looked up, his eyes held something Terry had never seen. Not love, not respect, something that looked like hatred. Why now? He asked. After 8 years, why reveal everything today? Terry walked to the desk, picked up the container of jerk chicken. Because today you didn't just ignore me. Today you actively diminished me. Today, you looked at me and decided I was too stupid to understand serious business. Today, you treated me like I was insignificant. She set it between them. I've spent 8 years invisible to protect your ego. But today, you made me invisible because you genuinely believe that's all I am. That's not love. That's not respect. What are you saying? Terry pulled a folder from her drawer. Divorce papers. She'd had them prepared months ago when she started seeing how Paul looked at her in public, like an accessory. She'd hoped she'd never need them. I'm saying I'm done being invisible, done protecting your pride at my dignity's expense, done loving someone who can't be bothered to ask about my day. She slid them across. You have 48 hours to move out. The house is mine. The company stays yours, but I'm calling in my investment. Find new backing or buy me out. Every door I opened closes. Every connection reconsiders. You'll learn what your life looks like without me holding it up. Paul stared like they were a snake. You can't do this. I own 67%. I can do anything I want. She walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, I really did love you. Enough to give you everything and ask for nothing but to be seen. But you couldn't even give me that. Terry, wait. 48 hours. Then I want you gone. She left him surrounded by evidence of the empire she'd built while he slept. Tomorrow she'd start dismantling the fiction. Tomorrow she'd stop being his invisible foundation and start being Terry McMillan, the woman who'd built an empire and was done hiding it. Tonight she just needed to cry, for the man she'd loved, for the marriage she'd lost, for 8 years spent making herself small enough to fit someone else's story. Tomorrow she'd remember she'd never been small, she'd been hidden, and there was a difference. Chapter 4. The Power Unleashed. Terry stood in her real office the next morning, 50 floors up in the tower that anchored downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked everything, the river, the neighborhoods, the developments, including 3 buildings bearing Paul's name but her money. She'd barely slept, had spent the night in a penthouse she kept for late work that Paul didn't know existed. Now, dressed in a power suit that cost more than most monthly rents, hair pulled back severely, Terry looked like what she was. Not Paul's wife, Teresa McMillan, the woman who'd built a $4 billion empire from nothing. 3 women sat across from her, her inner circle, people who'd watched her play small for 8 years. Diane Rodriguez, her attorney, Harvard law, sharp as broken glass. She'd been Terry's Columbia roommate, watched her build her first company in their dorm, been there for every victory and setback. Sharon Chen, her CFO, MIT undergrad, Wharton MBA. She managed Terry's investments, her complex web of shell companies and trusts. She knew where every dollar was and how to move it. Pastor Valerie James, who'd run the foster home where Terry lived from 15 to 18. who'd seen something in an angry, grieving teenager and refused to give up, who'd pushed her to apply to college, helped with financial aid, drove her to campus, who'd been Terry's moral compass ever since. "Ladies," Terry said, voice steady despite exhaustion, "I need to tell you something. I'm done hiding." Sharon grinned. "Finally. I've been waiting 8 years. I left Paul yesterday, gave him divorce papers, 2 days to move out." Pastor Valerie's expression softened. "Baby girl, are you okay?" "I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm relieved. I'm scared. But I won't be okay for a while. Right now I need to be strategic before I can be sad." Diane pulled up documents. "What do you need?" Every connection I gave Paul to evaporate, every preferential rate, every special consideration, every door I opened, closed, not slammed, but he needs to understand what his life looks like without me propping it up. "Consider it done," Sharon said, fingers flying. "Office lease renegotiated by end of business. His construction contracts adjusted. Investment accounts restructured." "What about his people?" Pastor Valerie asked. "The ones who didn't do anything wrong?" Terry had thought about this. "Anyone who wants to jump ship can work for my companies. We're hiring. Word will get out quietly. Anyone uncomfortable staying has options. I'm not punishing innocent people." "Ex-husband," Diane corrected. "Or soon-to-be. Paperwork files this afternoon." Terry walked to the windows. "There's more. I want to go public. No more shell companies for major holdings. No more maiden names on boards. I want people to know who Teresa McMillan is." The room went quiet. This was bigger than divorce. This was Terry stepping fully into power after years hiding. "You're sure?" Diane asked. "Once you do this, you can't take it back. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every move becomes news." "I'm sure. I spent 8 years invisible thinking it would protect my marriage. My marriage is over. I'm done protecting things that can't be saved." Sharon pulled up a document. "I've had a PR strategy ready for 3 years. We can start with a press release, strategic interviews. Forbes has been asking for ages." "Do it," Terry said. "All of it. I want everyone to know exactly who's been moving pieces." Pastor Valerie stood, put a hand on Terry's shoulder. "This is about more than Paul, isn't it?" Terry's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "Not yet. It's about me. I let him make me small because I was afraid he'd love my money instead, afraid he'd feel emasculated, afraid I'd lose him if I showed all of me, and I lost him anyway. So what was the point?" "The point is, you learned," Pastor Valerie said gently. "Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. Now you're going to live that truth." Over the next 3 days, Terry systematically dismantled every invisible support structure for Paul's company, quietly, professionally, thoroughly. The office lease came up for renewal, market rate now, triple what he'd been paying. The construction company suddenly had a full schedule. His next development would wait, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. The investment firm restructuring its portfolio, Paul's loans being called in, he'd need new financing. Paul's business partner called on day 2. "Mrs. McMillan, I need to understand what's happening." "I'm withdrawing my support," Terry said calmly. "Calling in my investment. Paul can buy me out or find new investors. That's business." "He can't afford to buy you out. You own 2/3. "That sounds like a Paul problem." Long silence. Then, "Can I ask, did Paul know? All these years? No. Jesus Christ, how is that possible?" "You'd have to ask him." "I'm walking away," Derek said suddenly. "I can't be associated with this. My wife got dropped from some guest list, the Symphony Gala. She's mortified. I have kids who will need these networks. I can't go down with Paul." "I understand," Terry said. She did. Collateral damage. "Derek, if you want out, I'll buy your share. Fair price. Start fresh." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you. God, thank you. I'll have my lawyer send paperwork. And Derek, Your wife's gala issue? I'll handle it. That wasn't aimed at you. She did. Fixed it. Because Derek hadn't done anything wrong except work with Paul. By day 3, Paul's world had imploded. Partner leaving, lease tripling, financing drying up, construction backing up, investors suddenly too busy to talk. Rebecca Walsh returned his call briefly. Mr. Ronald, I don't know what you did to Teresa Macmillan, but fix it. That woman could make or break careers with a phone call, including yours, especially yours. Terry didn't gloat. She just watched the fiction collapse and felt deep, bone-tired sadness. On day 4, she held a press conference, the room packed with reporters who'd been trying to figure out who was behind the shell companies for years. Terry took the podium in a white suit that made her look like power personified. My name is Teresa Macmillan, she said, voice carrying. I've been the investor behind several major real estate developments in this city for the past decade. Today, I'm stepping out of the shadows. No more shell companies, no more anonymous investments. From now on, when I fund something, you'll know it's me. A reporter raised a hand. Ms. Macmillan, why reveal yourself now? Why stay hidden all these years? Terry smiled, sad. I was in love. I thought staying invisible would protect my relationship. I was wrong. Sometimes what we do to protect what we love destroys it. I'm done hiding. I'm done making myself small. I'm Teresa Macmillan, and I built an empire. Time everyone knew it. The reporters erupted. Terry answered calmly, professionally, revealing bits of her story without ever mentioning Paul by name. She didn't have to. Everyone would figure it out. That night, Terry returned to the house to find Paul's things gone. He'd packed and left without goodbye, which was probably best. But he'd left something on the kitchen table. The container of jerk chicken, washed and dried, and a note. I'm sorry, I see you now. I just wish I'd seen you then. P. Terry picked up the container, held it for a long moment. Then she put it in the cabinet with Grandma Ruth's other kitchen things, a memorial to a promise kept and a love lost. Grandma Ruth had asked her to be Paul's strength, but she'd never told Terry to lose herself in the process. Now she was finding herself again. And if that meant Paul had to fall, she'd held him up long enough. Time for him to learn to stand alone. Chapter 5. The Sacrifice Revealed. Paul sat in his new apartment, a cramped one-bedroom that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking, staring at the envelope that had arrived that morning. No return address, hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet with 2 words. Open it. Beneath that, a key. Paul turned it over, confusion warring with curiosity. What was this? Some mind game? Except Terry wasn't vindictive. She was powerful, brilliant, apparently worth billions, but not cruel for cruelty's sake. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Ronald. The voice was older, female, familiar. This is Sharon Chen. We met at your company events. I'm Terry's CFO. I know who you are. What do you want? I want to meet. There are things you need to know about your wife, ex-wife. Things she didn't tell you. I think I've learned enough. Mr. Ronald, I'm not calling to twist the knife. I've known Terry for 15 years. I watched her make herself invisible for you. You deserve to understand why. Not for her sake. For yours. So maybe you learn something and don't repeat it. Paul's chest tightened. Where? That key. Storage unit downtown. Unit 217. Meet me in an hour. She hung up. Paul sat with the key for 10 minutes, debating. This was probably terrible. Getting more entangled when he was supposed to move forward, but curiosity gnawed at him. He went. The storage facility was in older downtown, renovated just enough to stay functional. Sharon waited outside the unit, holding coffee, looking tired. Thanks for coming, she said. What is this? Everything Terry didn't tell you. Everything she kept from you, not to control you, but to protect you. Sharon unlocked the unit and pulled up the rolling door. Inside were file boxes, dozens, meticulously labeled with dates going back years. "What am I looking at?" Paul asked. "Your life," Sharon said quietly. "Or rather, Terry's version, the invisible work she did to keep your world turning." She pulled out the first box, opened it. Inside were files, each labeled with dates and descriptions. Sharon pulled out the first. "4 years ago, September, your father died. Remember?" Paul's throat tightened. Of course. He had debts, significant debts, medical bills from cancer treatment, credit cards he'd maxed keeping your mother comfortable, personal loans, all told about $340,000. "He didn't," Paul said. "Dad died clear. He'd planned ahead." Sharon pulled out a document, bank statement, payments to various creditors over 2 months, everyone processed by Terry's shell company. "He died owing everything," Sharon said gently. "Terry paid it all, had it processed before bills reached your mother. Let your mom think he'd planned ahead because she knew you'd feel guilty if you knew the truth." Paul stared at the statement, hands shaking. "Why wouldn't Terry tell me?" "Because you were stressed about your first major development. Because she knew you'd insist on paying her back even if it bankrupted you. Because she loved you and she could afford it and she didn't need recognition. She just needed you to not carry that guilt." Sharon pulled out another file. "Your sister's medical bills, her lupus diagnosis. Remember how she got treated at the specialty clinic without waiting? How her bills kept getting reduced?" Paul did remember. Sarah diagnosed suddenly, violently, needed treatment fast. The clinic fast-tracked her. Bills were manageable instead of crushing. Sarah cried about their good fortune. "Terry," he whispered. "Terry paid all of it. $85,000 over 18 months. Routed through the clinic as financial assistance so Sarah wouldn't know. She didn't want your sister feeling indebted. She just wanted her better." Sharon pulled out another, each revealing another invisible act. The scholarship fund at Paul's old high school, named after his grandmother. That sent kids to college every year. Paul had been proud, thought the community created it. Terry created it, funded it entirely, named it after Grandma Ruth because she knew how much Paul loved her. The community center where Paul taught, nearly closed from lack of funding, got a mysterious donation that kept it running. Terry, his mother's heart surgery 2 years ago, should have cost a fortune, but got covered by insurance Paul hadn't realized his mom had. Terry paid the premiums, made sure his mother had coverage. His mother, who'd said awful things to Terry, who'd treated her like she wasn't good enough. Terry saved her life anyway. "Why?" Paul's voice broke. "Why would she do all this and never tell me?" "Because she loved you," Sharon said simply. "Because she loved your family. Because she had the money and you had the need and she didn't need credit. She just needed you to be okay." Paul sank onto a box, head in hands. "Oh God, I called her insignificant." "You did. I treated her like she was stupid." "You did that too. She was saving my family while I was—" He couldn't finish. Sharon pulled out one more file, the largest, handed it to Paul without comment. Inside were documents showing every investment Terry made in his company, but not just money, notes. Detailed notes in her handwriting showing how she'd analyzed each opportunity, restructured his business plan to make it viable, identified weaknesses, and quietly fixed them. There were meeting notes, too. From board meetings Paul hadn't known Terry attended, strategy sessions she'd had with his investors, calls with contractors. She'd been in every conversation that mattered, giving direction, making decisions, protecting his interests. And at the bottom, a letter, dated 1 week before the office humiliation, Terry's handwriting. Paul opened it with shaking hands. "Dearest Paul, our anniversary is coming. 8 years. Time for me to be honest. Time to stop hiding who I am because I'm afraid of how you'll react. I'm scared. What if you hate me for hiding this? What if you feel emasculated? What if you can't handle the truth? But I have faith in you. in us, in the love we've built. You're a good man. You're going to understand why I did this, why I gave you everything and asked for nothing, why I made myself invisible so you could shine. I love you, all of you. I hope you can love all of me too, even the parts I've been hiding. After our anniversary dinner, I'm going to tell you everything. No more secrets. Just us, the real us. I can't wait for you to finally see me, really see me, as your equal, as your partner. Not just as your wife, but as someone who built alongside you, who believed in you, who loved you enough to hide in shadows so you could walk in light. 8 years of loving you, 8 years of building together, even if you didn't know it. I wouldn't change any of it. You made me happy. I hope I made you happy too. Forever yours, Terry. She never sent it, because 2 days later, he humiliated her in that conference room. Paul read the letter 3 times, then pressed it to his chest and broke. Not polite tears, not quiet crying, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. She was going to tell me, he whispered. She was finally going to be honest, and You destroyed her, Sharon said. No gentleness now. You took the woman who gave you everything and made her feel like nothing. Now you live with that. How do I fix this? You don't, Sharon said bluntly. This isn't fixable. This isn't a business deal you can renegotiate or a mistake you can apologize away. You broke something fundamental. You taught Terry that even when she gives everything, even when she loves without limits, it's not enough if she's not small enough for your ego. Paul looked up, face wet, eyes desperate. There has to be something. There is, Sharon said. You can learn. You can become the man she deserved. Not for her. It's too late. But for whoever comes next. You can learn that love doesn't mean making someone small. It means celebrating them at full volume. She started walking away, paused. One more thing. Terry doesn't know I'm showing you this. She'd probably be furious. She wanted you to figure it out yourself. But I watched her shrink for 8 years, and I'm tired of watching good women disappear for mediocre men, so I'm giving you a gift she wouldn't. The truth. Why? Because I hope it destroys you, Sharon said honestly. I hope you carry this for the rest of your life. I hope every time you look in a mirror you remember what you lost, and I hope it makes you better. She left him, surrounded by boxes of invisible love, holding a letter that would never be sent. Paul sat in that storage unit for hours, reading file after file, seeing year after year of Terry quietly, systematically, lovingly holding up his entire world while he took credit for standing alone. By the time he left, the sun had set. He walked back to his cramped apartment in a daze, ordered food he didn't eat, sat in the dark trying to process what he'd lost. Terry hadn't just been his wife. She'd been his foundation, his investor, his advocate, his invisible architect. She'd built him an empire and let him think he did it, and instead of gratitude, he'd given her dismissal. Paul pulled out his phone, started to call her, stopped. What would he even say? How do you apologize for 8 years of not seeing someone? How do you fix having made someone feel invisible when they were holding up the entire sky? He couldn't. Sharon was right. This wasn't fixable. All Paul could do was learn. Become better. Become someone who could have deserved Terry, even if it was too late. He put his phone down and stared at the letter again. Read, I can't wait for you to finally see me. And felt something inside him shatter all over again. She'd wanted him to see her, that's all, to be seen, to be known, to be loved for all of who she was. And he'd been too blind, too arrogant, too comfortable to look. Now she was gone. And Paul was finally seeing clearly. But some things, once lost, can't be found again. Some mistakes don't get second chances. This was one of them. Chapter 6. Terry's Emergence. The Forbes magazine hit stands on Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, Terry's phone hadn't stopped ringing. The cover was striking. Terry in a charcoal suit standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, her expression calm and powerful and utterly confident. The headline read, "The Invisible Empire, How Teresa McMillan Built a $4 billion Fortune in the Shadows." The article was everything: detailed, thorough, honest. It talked about her childhood in foster care after her parents died when she was 12, about bouncing between homes until Pastor Valerie's group home became the first place she felt safe, about working 3 jobs through community college, then transferring to Columbia on full scholarship. It talked about her first company, started at 24, identifying a gap in affordable housing financing nobody else saw. How she'd built a software platform that revolutionized how low-income families could access home loans. How she'd sold that company for her first fortune before most people her age paid off student loans. It talked about the second company, the third, the investments, the quiet building of an empire while everyone assumed she was nobody. And it talked about why she'd stayed hidden. The article quoted Terry directly. "I wanted to see if the work could speak for itself, if ideas could win without ego or face attached, and I wanted to protect my personal life. I was in love. I thought staying invisible would preserve my marriage. I was wrong." The journalist, a woman named Angela Morrison, had been sympathetic but fair. She'd asked hard questions. "Don't you think hiding your success from your spouse was dishonest?" Terry's response was printed in full. Absolutely. It was dishonest and unfair, and born from fear. I was afraid that if he knew who I really was, he'd love me differently, or worse, he'd love what I had instead of who I was. So I hid. And in hiding, I taught him that I was exactly what I pretended to be: insignificant. That's on me. I take responsibility for that choice. The article went viral. By Wednesday, Terry was being invited to conferences, to join boards, to participate in panels. Calls came from investors wanting her insight, entrepreneurs seeking mentorship, journalists wanting follow-ups. Terry took some calls, declined most. She wasn't interested in fame for fame's sake, but she was interested in using her voice finally to do the work she'd been doing invisibly for years. Thursday morning, she stood before a room full of young women at a leadership conference. Most in their 20s and 30s, ambitious and hungry, trying to navigate a world that still often treated women as less than. "I want to talk about visibility," Terry began, voice carrying to every corner. "For years I worked in shadows. I made myself invisible, and I told myself it was strategic, smart, necessary. But the truth is, I was afraid." She paused, looking at the sea of faces. "I was afraid that if I took up space, I'd be too much. That if I showed my full power, I'd intimidate people. That if I asked for recognition, I'd be seen as arrogant or aggressive or all the other words we use to diminish women who refuse to shrink." Heads nodded throughout the room. They knew. They'd all felt it. "So I made a choice. I chose invisibility. I chose to work behind the scenes, to let others take credit, to build empires nobody knew were mine. And you know what? It worked. Professionally, I accomplished everything I wanted, but personally, it cost me everything." She told them about Paul without using his name, about making herself small, hiding her success, believing love meant diminishment. "I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this so you won't make the same mistake. Because here's what I learned. You cannot love someone who requires you to be less than you are. And you cannot be loved by someone who can't handle your full brightness." A young woman raised her hand. "But what if we lose people by being too much? What if we have to choose between success and love?" Terry smiled, sad but strong. "Then you haven't lost anything worth keeping. Anyone who loves you conditionally, who loves you only when you're dimmed, only when you're small, only when you're convenient, doesn't love you. They love what they can get from you. She walked to the edge of the stage. I spent 8 years giving everything to someone who couldn't see me. And when I finally demanded to be seen, I lost him. And you know what? I'm okay with that, because I found myself again. And that matters more. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, women lined up to talk, to share their own stories of making themselves small, hiding success to make partners comfortable, dimming their light to avoid threatening someone's ego. Terry listened to each one, offered advice when she could, mostly just bore witness. One woman, probably late 40s, waited until everyone left. "Ms. Macmillan, can I ask something personal?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? The 8 years? Knowing how it ended, would you do it differently?" Terry considered honestly. "I regret hiding. I regret not trusting him, or myself, enough to be honest from the beginning. But I don't regret loving him. He taught me something important. He taught me that I'd rather be alone and whole than partnered and fractured. That's worth something." Friday afternoon, Terry sat in Pastor Valerie's office at the group home. The place had expanded significantly over the years, funded largely by Terry's anonymous donations. Now it housed 30 kids, providing not just shelter but therapy, tutoring, college prep, job training. "I'm proud of you, baby girl," Pastor Valerie said, pouring tea. "You finally stepped into your light." "It's scary," Terry admitted. "Being visible, being known. People have opinions now." "Let them have opinions. You know who you are." "Do I?" Terry wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I thought I knew. I was Terry, Paul's wife. Terry, the woman who cooked and supported and stayed invisible. Now I'm Teresa Macmillan, billionaire entrepreneur. It feels like playing dress-up." "You've always been Teresa Macmillan," Pastor Valerie said firmly. "You just forgot for a while. You tried to fit yourself into someone else's story. Now you're remembering yours." "What if I mess up? What if I'm too visible now, too loud?" Pastor Valerie laughed, warm and rich. "Then you'll be too visible and too loud, but at least you'll be authentically yourself. That's all any of us can do." Terry stayed for hours, walking the halls, talking with kids, remembering what it felt like to be 15 and scared and convinced she had no future. One current resident, a girl named Maya, who reminded Terry painfully of herself, asked her to look at a business plan. "It's probably stupid," Maya said, not making eye contact. "But I've been thinking about how hard it is for foster kids to get internships because we don't have connections. So what if there was a platform that matched us with companies that actually want to give us chances?" Terry read through carefully. Rough but solid bones, clear thinking. This girl was smart. "It's not stupid at all," Terry said. "It's brilliant. Let me ask, do you want to build this?" Maya looked up, hope and fear warring. "I don't know how. I don't have money or connections or—" "You have me," Terry said simply. "If you want to build this, I'll fund it. I'll connect you with people who can help. I'll mentor you. But Maya, this has to be your passion, your work. I'll support you, but I won't do it for you. Understand?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone did it for me," Terry said, nodding toward Pastor Valerie's office. "Because I was exactly where you are, convinced I had nothing, and someone saw me and believed in me. Now I'm passing it forward." She spent the afternoon working with Maya on the business plan, teaching her to refine her pitch, identify her market, think strategically. It reminded Terry why she'd built her empire. Not for money, not for power, but for moments like this. For the chance to give someone else the opportunities she'd fought for. Saturday morning, Terry woke to find her mother on her doorstep. Catherine Macmillan was 73, elegant and sharp-eyed, with silver hair and an expression that suggested she saw everything and missed nothing. "Mama," Terry said, surprised, "I thought you were in Martha's Vineyard." "I was. I flew back after reading that Forbes article. We need to talk." They settled in Terry's living room with coffee, and for a long moment, Catherine just looked at her daughter. 8 years, she said finally. You've been lying to me for 8 years. I didn't lie, Mama. I just didn't. You let me think you were happy playing house with a man who didn't deserve you. You let me think you'd given up your ambitions. Do you have any idea how worried I was? Terry blinked back tears. I was happy. Or I thought I was. I loved him, Mama. I know you did, baby. But you loved him more than you loved yourself. And that's never sustainable. Catherine set down her coffee. Your father and I, we built a partnership. Equal. He never asked me to be less, so he could feel like more. That's what you deserved. I know that now. Do you? Because Terry, my brilliant, powerful daughter, you've spent your adult life proving you're enough. Building empires to show the world the foster kid from the South Side could be somebody. And then you met one man who made you feel like nothing, and you stayed for 8 years. The words hit like a blow. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You're worth $4 billion. You've changed thousands of lives. You've built something extraordinary. And you let one mediocre man make you question all of it. Terry stood, walked to the windows, tried to compose herself. What do you want me to say? That I was wrong? I was? That I made mistakes? I did? That I wasted 8 years? Maybe. But I also loved him. And love isn't always smart or strategic or right. Sometimes it's just love. Catherine came up behind her, put a hand on her shoulder. I'm not angry at you for loving him. I'm angry at him for not loving you back the way you deserved. And I'm angry at you for accepting so little when you deserve everything. I don't know how to do that, Terry admitted. How to believe I deserve everything. I spent my childhood being told I should be grateful for scraps. How do I unlearn that? By remembering who raised you after foster care. By remembering that Pastor Valerie and I and everyone who loves you has spent years telling you you're extraordinary. By finally believing it. They stood together looking out at the city, and Terry leaned into her mother's warmth, let herself be small and vulnerable in a way she couldn't be with anyone else. What do I do now? Terry asked. Now you live, Catherine said simply. You build. You create. You love again when you're ready, but this time you love someone who loves you back at full volume. And Terry, you never ever make yourself small for anyone again. Promise. That night, Terry attended a charity gala. She wore a red dress that made her feel powerful, diamonds her mother had given her, and walked into that ballroom with her head high. People stared, whispered. She heard snippets. That's Teresa McMillan. $4 billion? Can you believe she was married to Paul Ronald and he didn't know? What an idiot. Terry kept walking, found her table, made small talk, smiled and laughed, and acted like she belonged in this room, at this level, in this skin. And slowly over the evening she realized something. She did belong. This was her world now, public, visible, known. And while it was scary and overwhelming and sometimes exhausting, it was also real. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't playing a role. She was just being herself. Teresa McMillan, billionaire, philanthropist, former foster kid, woman who loved and lost and survived, woman who was done being invisible, the woman Paul never saw. But everyone else finally did. Chapter 7. The Mother's Betrayal. Paul stood outside his mother's hospital room, hands shaking too badly to push open the door. The call had come at 3 in the morning. Heart attack, severe. She was stable but critical. He'd driven through empty streets in a daze, mind unable to process another crisis when his life was already rubble, his business collapsing, his partner gone, his financing evaporated. And now this. He finally forced himself through the door. His mother looked small in the hospital bed, hooked to machines that beeped rhythmically. His sister Sarah sat beside her, red-eyed from crying. When she saw Paul, she stood and hugged him hard. "They say she's going to be okay," Sarah whispered. But it was close, really close. He sat on the other side of the bed, took his mother's hand. She was sleeping, sedated. He watched her chest rise and fall and thought about how close he'd come to losing her. A doctor came in, young woman with kind eyes and exhaustion written across her face. "Mr. Ronald, I'm Dr. Patterson. I've been treating your mother. Is she going to be okay?" "She should be, yes. But Mr. Ronald, I need to talk to you about something. Your mother's been having heart issues for a while, 2 years. She had a procedure back then that quite probably saved her life." Paul frowned. "What procedure? She never told me she had heart problems." "She didn't want to worry you. But the surgery 2 years ago addressed a severe blockage. Without it, she likely would have had a fatal heart attack months ago instead of this one, which we could treat." "Who paid for that surgery?" Paul asked, though he already knew. Already felt the familiar weight settling in his chest. Dr. Patterson checked her chart. It was covered by insurance through a private policy. Premium provider, very expensive. The policy holder was, she squinted at the screen, a Teresa Macmillan. Sarah gasped. "Terry? You're Terry?" "My ex-wife," Paul said numbly. "Yeah." After the doctor left, Sarah turned with fury in her eyes. "Are you telling me that while Mom was saying awful things about Terry, calling her names, trying to get you to divorce her, Terry was paying for Mom's health care?" "Yeah." "Jesus Christ, Paul, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with our family?" Paul couldn't answer, couldn't explain, because there was no explanation that made it okay. His mother woke an hour later, groggy and confused. When she saw Paul and Sarah, tears leaked from her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I scared you." "Don't apologize, Mama," Sarah said, holding her hand. "You just rest." "I need to tell you something," their mother said, voice weak, "about Terry, about what I did." Paul's stomach dropped. "Mom, you don't have to." "I do. I need to." She took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, I hired someone, a private investigator type. I paid her to get close to Paul, to seduce him, to break up his marriage. The room went silent. Sarah's mouth fell open. Paul felt like he'd been punched. "What are you talking about?" he managed. "That woman, Amber, the one at your office. I hired her, paid her to flirt with you, make herself available, see if you'd take the bait. I wanted you away from Terry. I didn't think she was good enough for you. I wanted you with someone from a better background." Paul stood so fast his chair clattered backward. "You did what?" "I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. I was wrong about all of it. Terry was perfect for you and I was too prejudiced to see it. I ruined your marriage. I ruined everything." Sarah was crying angry tears. "Mama, how could you? How could you do something so cruel?" "I thought I was protecting him. I thought—" She broke off, coughing. The machine started beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, checked vitals, adjusted something in her IV. Their mother's eyes fluttered closed. "You both need to leave," the nurse said firmly. "She needs rest. Come back in a few hours." In the hallway, Paul leaned against the wall, tried to breathe. Sarah stood beside him, arms crossed, looking like she wanted to break something. "Did you know?" she asked. "About Amber?" "I knew Terry knew about the affair. I didn't know Mom orchestrated it." "You cheated on her." Sarah's voice was flat. "Paul, Terry paid for my medical bills. Did you know that? All my lupus treatment. That was her. She paid every cent and never told me because she didn't want me to feel obligated. She saved my life. She saved Mom's life. And you cheated on her." "I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you threw away?" Paul slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. They stayed like that for a long time, two siblings processing their family's failures. "I need to tell her," Paul said finally. "Terry. She deserves to know Mom was behind the affair." "Will it change anything?" "No. But she deserves the truth anyway." He called Diane Rodriguez, Terry's lawyer, because he didn't have Terry's new number. Diane answered on the third ring, wary. "Mr. Ronald, what do you want?" "I need to speak with Terry, it's important. She doesn't want to speak with you. I know, but please. Tell her I found out something about my mother and the affair. Tell her I need to explain, just 10 minutes. There was a long pause. "I'll ask her. No promises." 3 days later, Paul received a text from an unknown number. "Coffee shop on 5th and Main. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. You get 15 minutes. Don't waste them. T." He arrived early, nervous and nauseous. Ordered coffee he couldn't drink. Waited. Terry walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, and Paul's breath caught. She looked different, not physically. She was as beautiful as always. But she carried herself differently, taller, more confident, like she'd finally stepped into herself completely. She sat across from him without smiling. "You have 15 minutes. Talk." "My mother had a heart attack. She's okay, she's going to survive, but while recovering she told me something about the affair, about Amber." Terry's expression didn't change. "I already know about Amber. She was a test. One you failed." "What? No, Amber wasn't. Terry, my mother hired her, paid her to seduce me, to break us up. Mom wanted me away from you because of her own prejudices. Amber was never random, it was orchestrated." Now Terry's expression shifted. Surprise, then something darker. "Your mother hired her?" "Yes. I just found out. I know it doesn't change what I did. I still made the choice to cheat, but I thought you should know it wasn't random. It was targeted." Terry sat back, processing. "The hospital bills, 2 years ago. I paid for your mother's heart surgery because you love her and I loved you. And she spent that whole time trying to destroy our marriage. I know, it's unforgivable. It really is." Terry's voice was cold. "Your mother took my money, my generosity, my care for your family, and used it to fund breaking us apart. That's a special kind of betrayal. I'm not asking you to forgive her, or me. I just thought you deserved the truth." "Why?" Terry leaned forward. "Why tell me this now? What do you gain?" "Nothing. I gain nothing. My mother betrayed both of us. You deserve to know that it wasn't your failure or mine entirely. There was someone actively working against us." Terry studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "I knew." "What?" "I knew about your mother hiring Amber. Found out about 6 months after the affair started. Had my people dig into who Amber really was and why she'd targeted you specifically. I knew your mother was behind it." Paul felt like the ground had dropped out. "You knew, and you never told me. I was protecting you. Again. Always protecting you from hard truths that might hurt your relationship with your family, even when your family was actively trying to destroy me." She smiled, but there was no warmth. "I was protecting you from your own mother's racism right up until the moment you called me insignificant. That's how far I was willing to go for you. Terry, Your 15 minutes are up." She stood. "I'm glad your mother is okay. Genuinely. Despite everything, I don't wish her harm. But Paul, her hiring Amber doesn't absolve you. You still made the choice. You still betrayed me. And even if she hadn't orchestrated it, you still spent 8 years not seeing me. That's on you, not her." "I know." "Do you? Because you came here like this information would change something, like knowing your mother was behind the affair would make me reconsider. But it doesn't. It just confirms what I already knew. You came from people who thought I wasn't enough. And you never once defended me from that belief. You agreed with them. That's not fair. I loved you. You loved the version of me that made you comfortable, the version that cooked and cleaned and stayed small. You didn't love the real me because you never bothered to find out who the real me was." She picked up her purse, prepared to leave. Paul stood too, desperate. "Terry, please. I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I finally understand what I lost." "Good. Work on yourself. Become better. Just do it for you, not for me. Because I'm done being anyone's motivation for growth. I'm done being the prize someone wins after they've finally become the person they should have been all along. Can I ask you something? Before you go? She paused. What? Do you hate me? After everything, do you hate me? Terry considered honestly. No, I don't hate you. I'm sad for you. Sad that you had 8 years to know an extraordinary woman and you missed all of it. Sad that you're figuring out who you should be after it's too late to matter. But I don't hate you. Hate requires caring, and Paul, I don't care anymore. That's worse than hate, and you need to understand that. She walked away, and Paul watched her go, understanding finally and completely that she was right. Indifference was worse than hatred. Hatred meant she still felt something. Indifference meant he'd become nothing to her. He'd wanted to be seen. Now he was invisible to her. The irony wasn't lost on him. Chapter 8. Paul's Transformation. 6 months after Terry walked out of that coffee shop, Paul stood in a community center in the same neighborhood where he'd first met her. But this time, he wasn't teaching financial literacy. He was a student. The class was called Emotional Intelligence for Men, and it was full of guys like him, men who'd screwed up their relationships, their lives, their chances at happiness because they'd never learned to see beyond their own egos. Men who'd made women small to feel big, men trying to figure out how to be better. The instructor, a therapist named Leonard, was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a no-bullshit attitude Paul had come to appreciate. All right, gentlemen, week 8. Today we're talking about accountability versus victimhood. Who wants to share? Paul raised his hand. 6 months ago, he would have sat silently, too proud to admit weakness. Now he knew that pride was exactly what had destroyed him. I want to talk about blame, Paul said. I've spent the past 6 months blaming everyone but myself for my failed marriage, my mother for hiring that woman, Terry for not telling me the truth from the beginning, my business partner for leaving. But the reality is, none of that matters. I'm the one who made the choices that ended my marriage. Leonard nodded. Keep going. I cheated. I dismissed my wife's intelligence. I made her feel small because making her small made me feel big. And even now, even after losing everything, part of me wants to make excuses, wants to say it was complicated, there were factors, other people played roles. But at the end of the day, I had a woman who loved me and I couldn't see her. That's on me. Just me. The other men nodded. They understood. They'd all been there. After class, Paul went to his job. He was working as a project coordinator at a non-profit that built affordable housing, basically doing the work he'd dreamed of doing when Terry first met him, except now for a salary that barely covered rent instead of as a CEO with a corner office. His co-worker, Brenda, poked her head into his cubicle. Paul, there's someone here to see you. He looked up, confused. He never had visitors, but when he walked to reception, he understood. Dorothy, his former assistant from Ronald Development. She stood looking nervous and determined. Dorothy, he said, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Can we grab coffee? They went to the diner across the street, the cheap kind with questionable coffee and vinyl booths. Dorothy ordered tea and studied him. You look different, she said. I am different, or I'm trying to be. I heard about your mother's heart attack. I'm glad she's recovering. Thank you. Uncomfortable silence. Then Dorothy said, I came to tell you something. Mrs. Macmillan didn't send me, and she'd probably be angry if she knew. But I've been working for her for a long time now, and I've watched what losing you did to her. Paul's chest tightened. She seems fine, thriving actually. She is thriving, professionally. But Paul, she's also heartbroken. She hides it well, but I see it. The way she works herself to exhaustion so she doesn't have to think. The way she flinches when she sees couples. The way she's built walls so high nobody can get close. Why are you telling me this? Because you're both broken. and you're both refusing to deal with it. You're becoming a better person, which is good. She's becoming more successful, which is also good, but neither of you is actually healing. What am I supposed to do? She doesn't want to see me. She made that clear. I know. I'm not suggesting you try to win her back. That ship has sailed. I'm suggesting you write her a letter, a real one, not asking for forgiveness, not asking for another chance, just acknowledging the full truth of what happened. She needs closure as much as you do. She won't read it. Maybe not, but maybe she needs to know you finally understand. Maybe you both need that. Dorothy left, and Paul sat in that diner for another hour, thinking. Then he went home and pulled out paper and a pen, not a computer. This needed to be handwritten, personal, real. He started writing. Dear Terry, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. But I need to write it anyway, because Dorothy was right. We both need closure, and I need you to know that I finally understand what I lost. I lost a woman who loved me enough to build me an empire and let me think I built it myself, who saved my family repeatedly and never asked for thanks, who made herself invisible so I could shine, even though her light was blinding and mine was a candle. I lost a woman who cooked my grandmother's recipes to remind me of home, who learned about sustainable development because she knew it mattered to me, who believed in my dreams even when they seemed impossible, who was my biggest champion and I didn't even know it. I lost a partner who could have taught me everything if I'd been humble enough to ask, who could have shown me what real power looks like if I'd been brave enough to see it, who offered me the gift of her whole self, and I rejected it because I preferred the small, safe version I'd imagined. I lost you, Terry. I lost the best person I've ever known because I was too arrogant, too insecure, too blind to see what was right in front of me. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not writing to ask for another chance. We're done, and I accept that. I'm writing because you deserve to know that your 8 years weren't wasted. You taught me what real love looks like, even if I didn't appreciate the lesson until it was too late. You taught me that love is sacrificial, but it should never require diminishment. That partnership means building each other up, not making one person small so the other can feel big. That seeing someone, really seeing them, is the greatest gift you can give. I see you now, Terry, all of you. Your brilliance, your generosity, your strength, your enormous heart. I see how extraordinary you are and how completely I failed to recognize it when it mattered. I see what I lost, and I will carry that loss for the rest of my life. But I also see what you gained. You gained your freedom. You gained your visibility. You gained the chance to be fully yourself without someone making you small. And while it kills me that I'm not there to witness it, I'm grateful you're finally being seen the way you always deserved. I hope you find someone who sees you from the beginning, who celebrates your success instead of feeling threatened by it, who asks you about your day and actually listens, who loves all of you, not just the parts that make them comfortable. You deserve that. You deserve everything. I'm working on becoming the kind of man who could have deserved you. Not for you, it's too late for that, but for whoever comes next. And more importantly, for myself. Because you taught me that I was living small, and I finally want to live big. Thank you for 8 years of love I didn't earn. Thank you for everything you gave that I was too blind to see. Thank you for walking away when I couldn't be what you needed. That took more strength than staying ever could have. I hope you're happy, Terry. I hope you're building incredible things and changing lives and taking up all the space you deserve. I hope you never make yourself invisible again. And I hope someday you can think of me without pain, just as someone who loved you badly but learned from it. As someone who sees you now, even if it's too late to matter. With respect and regret, Paul. He sealed the letter and sent it to Diane with a note asking her to pass it along only if Terry wanted to receive it. He had no idea if she'd read it, no idea if it would matter, but he'd said what he needed to say. The rest was up to her. 3 weeks later, he received a response. Not from Terry, from her lawyer. Mr. Ronald, Mrs. Macmillan received your letter. She asked me to convey that she appreciates your words and wishes you well in your continued growth. She does not wish to resume contact, but she wants you to know that she holds no ill will toward you. She also asked me to tell you that the non-profit you're currently working for has received an anonymous donation that will allow them to expand their operations. This donation is not from her personally, and she insists I make that clear. However, she wanted you to know that your current work matters and is making a difference. She wishes you well. Diane Rodriguez. Paul read the letter 3 times. Terry had made sure his non-profit got funding, not to help him, she was clear about that, but to help the families they served, because even now, even after everything, she saw the work that mattered and supported it. That was who she was, who she'd always been, and he'd been too blind to see it. Paul folded the letter carefully and put it in his desk drawer next to the longer letter he'd written her. Then he went back to work. Back to building housing for families who needed it. Back to the dream he'd had before ego and ambition twisted it into something else. He was becoming better, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. And if that was all his relationship with Terry ever gave him, the chance to become someone better, then it had been worth it, even if he'd learned the lesson too late to keep her. Chapter 9. The Meeting. A year after the office humiliation, Terry stood in the back of a conference hall watching Paul give a presentation. She'd seen the announcement online. He was speaking at a non-profit summit about innovative approaches to affordable housing. She'd almost not come. But curiosity won out over caution, and here she was, hidden in shadows, watching the man she used to love talk about the work they'd both cared about. He looked different, thinner, more serious. There was a gravity now that hadn't been there before, a weight suggesting he'd finally learned that success came with responsibility. His presentation was good, thoughtful, well-researched, grounded in actual community needs rather than ego-driven flashiness. When Q&A started, someone asked about his previous company, Ronald Development Group. Terry watched Paul's face carefully. "I learned a lot from that experience," Paul said carefully. "Mostly, I learned that I'd been taking credit for work I hadn't fully earned. I had tremendous support from people I failed to acknowledge. I made mistakes, ethical and personal ones, that cost me almost everything. What I'm building now is smaller, but it's authentic. It's mine, and that matters more than the size of my name on a building." The honesty surprised her. A year ago, Paul would have made excuses, deflected blame. Now he was owning his failures publicly. Growth was possible after all, even when she doubted it. After his talk, Terry watched people approach him with questions, with praise, with business cards. He handled each interaction with genuine interest and without the performative ego he used to bring. He asked questions, listened to answers, treated each person like they mattered. She was about to leave when Pastor Valerie appeared beside her. "Baby girl, what are you doing hiding back here?" Terry jumped. "Pastor Val, what are you doing here?" "Same thing you are, checking on Paul, seeing if he learned anything." The older woman studied Terry's face. "You look good. Powerful but tired. When's the last time you slept a full night?" "I sleep fine." "That's not what I asked." Terry sighed. "I work a lot. It helps." "Working yourself to death so you don't have to feel anything isn't healing, Terry." "I'm not trying to—" Terry stopped. Was that what she was doing? Working so much she didn't have time to process the grief. "Come on," Pastor Valerie said, taking Terry's arm. "Let's get out of here before he sees you. That's not a conversation either of you needs today." But as they were leaving, Paul looked up from his conversation and their eyes met across the crowded room. Terry saw surprise flash across his face, followed by something softer. Not hope. More like quiet acknowledgement. He gave her a small nod. She nodded back. Then she left. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Terry and Pastor Valerie walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, found a quiet corner, ordered tea. "Why did you really go?" Pastor Valerie asked. "To the conference?" I don't know, curiosity. I wanted to see if he'd changed. And? He has, or he's starting to. He seems more humble, more real. Does that change anything for you? No, Terry said immediately. We're done. That's not going to change. But I guess I'm glad he's becoming better. For his sake. For whoever comes next. What about you? Who comes next for you? Terry sipped her tea. I don't know. I've been on a few dates, nothing serious. Honestly, I'm not sure I trust my judgment anymore. I spent 8 years with someone who didn't see me. What if I pick wrong again? You won't. How can you be sure? Because now you know what it feels like to be invisible. You'll never tolerate it again. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Pastor Valerie said, I saw Paul last month at the group home. He's been volunteering there, teaching financial literacy to the kids. He's good with them, patient, real, no ego. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know he's trying, not to win you back, not to prove something to you, but because he's genuinely trying to become better. And while that doesn't fix what he broke, it means the 8 years you gave him weren't completely wasted. You taught him something valuable, even if he learned it too late to keep you. Terry felt tears prick her eyes. I don't want to care if he's better. I want to be over it. Being over it doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without it controlling you. You can acknowledge that Paul is growing without it changing anything about your path forward. That evening, Terry attended the opening of a new community center she'd funded in the South Side, not far from where she'd grown up. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, designed specifically for the neighborhood's needs. Computer labs, meeting spaces, a commercial kitchen, offices for non-profits. She was giving her speech, thanking community leaders and architects, when she saw Paul slip in through the back door. He stood quietly, not drawing attention, just listening. After her speech, after ribbon cutting, after tours and photographs, Terry found him waiting by the community garden outside. You didn't have to stay, she said. I wanted to. This is beautiful work, Terry. Really beautiful. They stood in awkward silence, the first time they'd been alone since that coffee shop months ago. I got your letter, Terry said finally. The one you sent through Diane. I didn't expect you to read it. I almost didn't, but I did. And Paul, I want you to know, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate that you're working on yourself, but it doesn't change anything between us. I know. I didn't write it hoping it would. Then why write it? Because you deserve to know that your 8 years mattered. That even though I was too blind to see you then, I see you now. And you were right about everything, every single thing you said to me. I just needed you to know I finally understand. Terry looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine remorse, genuine change. But she also felt nothing romantic. No pull, no desire to try again, just a quiet acknowledgement that they'd both survived something difficult and come out different. I'm glad you're becoming better, she said, genuinely. But we're not going to be friends, Paul. We're not going to have coffee and catch up. We're just going to be two people who used to know each other and now don't anymore. Is that okay? He nodded, and she saw him swallow hard. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what I can give. A young girl ran up to Terry, excited about the new computer lab. Terry turned her attention to the child, laughing at her enthusiasm, promising to show her how to code. When she looked back, Paul was walking away, his shoulders a little hunched, his pace slow. Pastor Valerie came up beside Terry. You okay? I am, Terry said, surprised to realize it was true. I really am. Seeing him doesn't hurt anymore, it's just neutral, like seeing someone I used to work with. That's healing, right? That's exactly healing. Over the following months, Terry occasionally heard about Paul through the non-profit community. He'd started a consulting service. helping small non-profits develop housing programs. He was good at it, apparently. Humble, knowledgeable, fair. She was glad, not because she wanted him back, not because she missed him, but because she'd always believed in the man he could be, and it seemed he was finally becoming that person. Meanwhile, Terry continued building her empire, now fully visible. She sat on boards, gave keynote speeches, funded projects that mattered, and slowly, carefully, she started dating again. There was Jonathan, the literature professor who wrote poetry and made her laugh, but ultimately wanted different things. There was Michael, the architect who understood her vision but couldn't handle how much she worked. There were others, brief connections that reminded her she was capable of feeling something, even if none stuck. And through it all, she kept building, kept growing, kept taking up space in the world instead of hiding in shadows. She was Teresa Macmillan, the woman Paul never saw, the woman the world finally did, and she was learning, day by day, that being seen was worth every risk, every loss, every hard lesson, even the lesson that had cost her 8 years and a marriage. Especially that one. Chapter 10, The Final Goodbye. 2 years after the divorce, Terry stood at the entrance of the same community center where she'd first met Paul. The place had been renovated with funds she'd donated, and today they were celebrating its anniversary with a ceremony honoring volunteers. Paul was being honored. She knew because she'd seen his name on the program. She'd considered not attending, but this center mattered to her. It was where her life had changed, where she'd fallen in love, where she'd learned what hope looked like. She sat in the back row, watching him accept a plaque for his volunteer work. His speech was brief and humble. "I teach here because this place saved me," Paul said. "Not financially, emotionally. I came here broken, having lost everything that mattered because I'd been too arrogant to see what I had. The people here taught me how to rebuild, not my career, myself. So thank you for giving me a second chance." After the ceremony, Terry stayed to talk with kids, to see programs in action, to remember why she did this work. She was laughing with a teenager about her college essay when she felt someone watching. Paul stood a respectful distance away, the plaque in his hands, expression carefully neutral. "Congratulations," Terry said. "Thank you for the honor and for funding this place. I know you're behind most of the renovations. It's a good center. It deserves support." Familiar, awkward silence. Then Paul said, "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Terry hesitated, then nodded. They walked outside to the same garden where they'd once planned their future. "I'm getting married," Paul said quietly. Terry felt a small jolt of surprise but no pain. "Congratulations. Who is she?" "Her name is Lisa. She works at the non-profit I consult for. She's kind and smart, and she knows everything about me from the beginning. Everything I did wrong with you, everything I learned, and she's choosing me anyway." "That's good, Paul, really. I'm happy for you." "Are you? Happy?" Terry considered honestly. "I am. I'm building incredible things. I have amazing people in my life. I'm seeing someone actually, a documentary filmmaker named James. He asks me about my work and actually listens to the answers. He celebrates my success instead of feeling threatened. He sees me, all of me. So yes, I'm happy." Paul's smile was genuine. "Good. You deserve that. So do you." They stood as the sun set behind them, two people who'd once promised forever and learned that sometimes forever doesn't last. "I'm sorry," Paul said suddenly. "For all of it, for not seeing you, for taking 8 years to learn what should have been obvious, for being too small to handle how big you were. I know you are, and I've forgiven you, Paul. Not because you earned it, but because holding on to anger was taking up space I needed for other things. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means I'm not carrying your mistakes anymore. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to understand something important. What happened between us taught me my worth. It taught me to never make myself small again, and while that lesson was painful, It was also necessary. So in a strange way, our marriage ending was the best thing that could have happened to me. Paul flinched but nodded. I'm glad you found yourself, even if it meant losing me. I didn't lose you, Paul. I lost the version of you I'd created in my head, the man I thought you were. Maybe you lost the real me too, the woman you never bothered to discover. We both lost what we thought we had. But we found ourselves. That's worth something. A car pulled up, James picking Terry up. He got out, walked over with easy confidence, kissed her cheek. Ready? Hi, I'm James, he said to Paul, offering his hand. Paul, Terry's ex-husband. Right, I've heard about you. She speaks well of you. Terry saw Paul's surprise and smiled. I do. You're becoming a good man, Paul. Just not my man anymore. She took James's hand, started toward the car, then turned back. Paul, thank you. For what? For being exactly who you were. For showing me what I wouldn't tolerate. For pushing me to finally step into my full power. I wouldn't be who I am now without having been invisible to you first. That's a generous way to see it. It's the true way. Take care of yourself. Love Lisa the way she deserves. And Paul, never make her invisible, not even for a second. I won't. I promise. Terry got in the car and James drove away. She watched Paul get smaller in the rearview mirror, standing alone in that garden where they'd once dreamed together. You okay? James asked, squeezing her hand. I'm perfect, Terry said, and meant it. For the first time in years, I'm actually perfect. That night, Terry stood in her penthouse looking out at the city she'd helped build. Her phone buzzed with messages, business opportunities, speaking requests, people wanting her time and expertise. Her life was full, busy, purposeful, but it was also hers, fully, completely hers. She thought about Paul sometimes, hoped he was happy, hoped he'd learned his lesson. But she didn't miss him, didn't wonder what if, didn't regret walking away, because walking away from him had meant walking toward herself. And that journey, from invisible to visible, from hidden to seen, from small to powerful, had been worth every painful step. Terry picked up her phone and texted her mother. Coming to Martha's Vineyard this weekend. Want to celebrate. Celebrate what? Her mother texted back. Being free, being whole, being me. I'll open the good wine. Terry smiled, set down her phone. Tomorrow she had a board meeting, lunch with Pastor Valerie, dinner with James. Her life was full of people who saw her, celebrated her, loved her without asking her to shrink. And somewhere across the city, Paul Ronald was hopefully learning to see his own partner the same way. But that was his story now. This was hers, and she was finally, beautifully, powerfully living it. The end.